meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, liebe Studierende, liebe Gäste. Ich begrüße Sie zur heutigen Mosse-Lecture, die mit der Frage nach Endless Uprisings, vielleicht nicht nur eine Frage, sondern auch ein Aufruf, eine neue Schwungkurve nimmt in ihrem Parcours der Fluchtlinien des Kreativen, wie wir ihn im Titel unseres Infinito-Programms dieses Semesters genannt haben. In diese Schwungkurve nimmt uns Didi-Huberman, den ich ganz herzlich begrüßen möchte. Wir sind sehr froh, dass Sie unserer Einladung gefolgt sind. Mit Didi-Huberman kommen wir aufs Neue zur Frage der Bilder, die wir zu Beginn des Semesters mit Peter Geimer unter dem Begriff der Nachbilder unvollendeter Vergangenheit diskutiert haben. Ich erinnere Sie beispielsweise an die Bilder, die er uns von Adolf Menzel gezeigt hat. Zum Beispiel die Gouache stehende Rüstungen, auf der stehende, ja wie verlebendigt sich auf den Betrachter zubewegende Ritterrüstungen gemalt sind, die zugleich zu sehen geben, dass sie leer sind. Anlass, darüber nachzudenken, was Peter Geimer genannt hat, den Widerstand von etwas, das nicht mehr vorhanden ist. In den 2 darauffolgenden Lectures ging es um die Literatur im Zeichen des Infinito. Nicht im Sinne eines Mehr ist nicht erschienen, einer unerfüllt gebliebenen Ankündigung weiterer Bände, sondern eines Schreibens, das, wie Barbara Naumann für Marcel Proust gezeigt hat, je mehrbändiger, desto unvollendeter ist. Bedeutendes und Ephemeres gleichermaßen festhalten wollend, wird der Raum zwischen dem bereits Geschriebenen und dem zuvor als Romanende Beschlossenen immer unüberbrückbarer. Dem stand bei der letzten Mosse-Lecture vor einer Woche mit dem Autor Ulrich Pelzer der starke Satz entgegen, mit dem Pelzer auf die Frage antwortete, wie und wann er denn einen letzten Satz als Romanende formuliere, wann ein Werk auserzählt sei. Seine Antwort: am letzten Tag. In seiner kritischen Auseinandersetzung mit dem viel zitierten Satz aus Walter Benjamins Einbahnstraße, das Werk sei die Totenmaske der Konzeption, formulierte Ulrich Pelzer als eine Erfahrung seines Schreibens: sich nicht vor Kohärenz drücken, aber sie als optional zeigen. Für solche Spannungen von Widerstand und Kohärenz wird sich, so vermute ich jedenfalls, auch Didi-Hubermans Vortrag interessieren, an den sich ein Gespräch mit Sigrid Weigel anschließen wird. Ich freue mich sehr, dass wir Sigrid Weigel dafür gewinnen konnten, ihr seit Jahren andauerndes intellektuelles Gespräch mit Didi-Huberman heute Abend fortzusetzen. Sie wird ihn gleich auch einführen und zuvor möchte ich Sigrid Weigel Ihnen kurz vorstellen. Viele von Ihnen kennen sie natürlich hier in Berlin und weit darüber hinaus wirkend als langjährige Direktorin des Zentrums für Literatur- und Kulturforschung, das sie bis vor 2 Jahren geleitet hat, was zum einen bedeutet, es institutionell durch alle wissenschaftspolitischen und wissenschaftsfinanzierenden Untiefen, um nicht zu sagen Unwahrscheinlichkeiten, immer wieder an sicheres Land manövriert zu haben, um zum anderen inspirierende Forschung überhaupt initiieren und durchführen zu können. Und zwar eine geisteswissenschaftliche Forschung, die auch in andere Denk- und Wissenschaftskulturen, möglicherweise sogar verändernd, hineinwirkt. Sigrid Weigel hat in vielen Projekten und Publikationen zahlreiche Forschungsfelder entwickelt, um nur wenige Stichworte zu nennen, zur Dialektik der Säkularisierung und Figurationen des Märtyrers, zu Konzepten von Generation, Genealogie und Überlieferung, zur Topographie pluraler Kulturen Europas, zur Neurowissenschaft zwischen Natur- und Kulturwissenschaft, zur Grammatologie der Bilder. So auch der Titel ihrer neuesten Monographie bei SOCAM und natürlich Gegenstand zahlreicher Gespräche mit unserem heutigen Gast. Ein anderer gemeinsamer Fokus: Walter Benjamin. Sigrid Weigels Benjamin-Buch »Die Kreatur, das Heilige, die Bilder«, bereits ins Englische und ins Italienische übersetzt, erscheint jetzt auch auf Französisch. Einen weiteren Schwerpunkt mindestens möchte ich noch nennen. Und das verbindet sich mit einer derzeit laufenden Ausstellung, die Sigrid Weigel erarbeitet und deren Begleitkatalog sie herausgegeben hat. Das Thema des Gesichts, in dem sich die genannten Perspektiven vielfältig kreuzen. Bilder und Bilder machen, Kunst- und Mediengeschichte, Religions- und Wissenschaftsgeschichte. Im Hygienemuseum in Dresden können Sie oder sollten Sie besuchen noch bis zum 25. Februar die Ausstellung »Das Gesicht eine Spurensuche. Sigrid, du hast das Wort.
Georges Didi-Huberman vorzustellen, ist ein Vergnügen, aber natürlich auch eine enorme Herausforderung angesichts der Fülle seiner Publikationen und weiteren Aktivitäten wie Ausstellungen und Ähnlichem und der unendlichen Kreativität. Ich kann nicht so schnell lesen, wie Georges Didi-Huberman schreibt, deswegen kenne auch ich nicht alles. Aber es ist natürlich auch eine Herausforderung, weil ich davon ausgehe, dass Sie alle Arbeiten von Georges Didi-Huberman kennen. Ich vermute von verschiedenen Seiten her, denn die Aspekte und der Kosmos der Arbeiten der bildtheoretischen, kunsthistorischen und kunstästhetischen, der tanzpolitischen und auch literaturpolitischen Arbeiten ist so groß, dass ich sowieso jetzt nur einige Aspekte davon nennen kann. Am Anfang, und ich habe mal nachgerechnet, das war vor 35 Jahren, standen die Pathosformeln der Hysterie mit dem Buch über Charcots fotografische Ikonographie, auf Deutsch Erfindung der Hysterie, 1982. Wie weit Abi Warburg da bereits sozusagen mitgeschrieben hat, weiß man nicht genau. Es ist nicht so genau erkennbar, aber erkennbar ist es aus der dann einsetzenden unendlichen Sensafine, Lektüre und Auseinandersetzung mit Abi Warburg und dem jahrelangen Studium im Archiv von Abi Warburg. Wobei ich immer bewundert habe, dass Georges Didi-Huberman mit den schwer lesbaren Texten, dann dazu noch in einer Fremdsprache, in der deutschen Sprache, umgehen konnte, ganz souverän, wie viele andere Warburg-Forscher nicht. Und aus dieser Arbeit ist dann 2002 ja auch die wunderbare Monographie, eine der wenigen wirklich umfangreichen Monographien über Abi Warburg entstanden, L'image survivante, Histoire de l'art et temps des fantômes selon Abi Warburg, auf Deutsch Das Nachleben der Bilder, leider ist 2010 erschienen. Eine Arbeit, in der Abi Warburg kontextualisiert wird, sowohl in der Wissenschaftsgeschichte als auch in der Geschichte der Physiologie und Psychoanalyse seiner Zeit. Aber was ich besonders bewundere und schätze an der Arbeit von Georges Didi-Huberman ist, dass er eben nicht nur jemand ist, der über Abi Warburg arbeitet, sondern ich würde sagen, einer der kongenialen Erben Abi Warburgs, indem er im Grunde genommen die Arbeit von Warburg fortsetzt und sie im Angesicht der heutigen künstlerischen Produktionen und politischen Fragen fortschreibt. Bevor aber diese Arbeit stattgefunden hat, hat Georges Didi-Huberman noch etwas anderes unternommen. Er hat nämlich die Methode der Ikonographie, die von Warburg ja bereits in eine kritische Ikonologie verwandelt wurde, nämlich in ein Graben sozusagen nach den hinterlassenen Spuren und auch den Lücken in den Überlieferungen, nochmal umgegraben. Und zwar in seiner wunderbaren Arbeit über Fra Angelico, einer Untersuchung der Verkündigungsbilder von Fra Angelico und anderen Malern des Trecento und Quattrocento, in der er den unbedeutenden Grund der Fresken untersucht, sich sozusagen dem Grund der Bilder im wörtlichen Sinne zuwendet. Und zwar indem er die Marmo Finti, den gemalten künstlichen Marmor unter den Bildern, unter den ikonografischen Bildern, aber auch den undeutlichen Boden in den Bildern, zwischen den Füßen der Figuren, auf dem diese mehr zu schweben denn zu stehen scheinen, in den Blick nimmt. Und genau dieses untersucht als anikonisches, als nicht figürliches und zugleich als Möglichkeitsbedingung für die Malerei mit ihren figürlichen Darstellungen und piktorialen Bildern. Also eine Analyse der Voraussetzungen der Ikonographie in der Figuration, eine Bildtheorie der Figuration. Vielleicht könnte man als Seitenprodukte die Arbeiten nennen über die Ähnlichkeit und die Berührung, über den Abdruck, das Anikonische und Nicht-Ikonografische, das auf andere Art und Weise entsteht, nämlich vor allen Dingen durch das, was Didi-Huberman die Kontaktähnlichkeit nennt. Das heißt, den Kontakt mit dem Objekt selbst, der dann Spuren hinterlässt, die wir späteren zu lesen lernen, mithilfe von Georges Didi-Hubermans Büchern. Als Erbe von Abi Warburg hat er auch eine Reihe von Nympha-Büchern publiziert. Die Faszination für die Nympha, für die Gangart der Nympha als Nachfolgerin der Mänaden und damit als eine Inkorporation der Pathosformel von Abi Warburg, hat Didi-Huberman fortgeschrieben mit mehreren Büchern, ich nenne nur zwei, die Nympha Profunda und die Nympha Moderna. Ein anderes Projekt, was er über viele, viele Jahre verfolgt, was sozusagen aus der Auseinandersetzung mit Abi Warburg hervorgegangen ist, was Georges Didi-Huberman auf den Begriff der Achronizität gebracht hat, die Achronizität der Bilder oder auch das Achronologische in der Konstellation von Bildern, die einerseits alles gleichzeitig zeigen und eben keine chronologischen Narrative uns vorstellen, als eine spezifische Zeitlichkeit von Bildern untersucht, die uns in die Position setzt, die Lesbarkeit der Geschichte in den Bildern zu lernen, in den Bildern, die uns hinterlassen worden sind. Und diese spezifische Zeitlichkeit wird von Didi-Huberman dann als ein Spannungsverhältnis von Voir und Savoir, von Sehen und Wissen fruchtbar gemacht. Um zu wissen, muss man sich ein Bild machen. So lautet der Eingangssatz des Buches Images malgré tout, Bilder trotz allem, 2003. Ein Satz, der sich liest wie ein spätes, etwas verstelltes, entstelltes und zurechtgerücktes Echo zu dem Satz, die ihr hier eintretet, lasset alle Hoffnung fahren, über dem Höllentor in Dantes Divina Commedia. Die Bilder aus den Gaskammern von Auschwitz werden als Bilder der Zeugenschaft untersucht in diesem Buch, das international Furore gemacht hat und in die bildtheoretischen Gewissheiten, die bis dahin herrschten, gewissermaßen wie eine Bombe eingeschlagen ist, weil man alles nochmal von vorne denken musste. Die Formeln des Undarstellbaren funktionierten nicht mehr, weil Didi-Huberman gezeigt hat, dass diese Bilder zugleich zwei Ordnungen angehören. Nämlich einmal dem, wie er sagt, was man de jure als unmöglich bezeichnen muss, was in der Rede von der Undarstellbarkeit verformelt war, und dem de facto Möglichen, ja Notwendigen. Denn um zu wissen, muss man sich ein Bild machen. Durch dieses Buch ist Didi-Huberman, der schon zuvor international wohl der bedeutendste Bildtheoretiker war, sich mit Aktionsradius zwischen Südamerika, China, Frankreich, Deutschland und vielen anderen Orten auch zu einem der am heißesten diskutierten Bildtheoretiker geworden, zum Nutzen der Bildtheorie, wie ich denke. Bei ihm selber hat diese Auseinandersetzung ein weiteres, ganz anderes Projekt in Gang gesetzt, dem er den Titel gegeben hat, L'œil de l'histoire, das Auge der Geschichte. Wiederum ein Serienprojekt, ein Projekt, zu dem bereits mehrere Bücher erschienen sind. Ich nenne zwei, die mir besonders wichtig sind, nämlich die Auseinandersetzung mit Brechts Kriegsfibel in dem Buch Wenn die Bilder Position beziehen. Es geht also um die Frage des politischen Potenzials von Bildern, insbesondere in Krisen und Situationen und in Situationen des Krieges und der Katastrophe. Position beziehen ist eben nicht dasselbe als eine Tendenz vertreten, wie er sehr genau herausarbeitet in diesem Buch. Oder einem anderen aus dieser Serie vom Auge der Geschichte, die Remontagen der erlittenen Zeit, in dem er zurückkommt auf die Frage der Bilder aus Auschwitz und hier im Zentrum den 16 mm Film Falkenau 1945 von Samuel Fullers analysiert, der die Begräbnisrituale gefilmt hat, die die amerikanischen Offiziere angeordnet haben, nachdem sie die Lager geöffnet hatten und auf die Berge von Leichen gestoßen waren. Es gibt noch ganz andere Arbeiten, Publikationen zu zahlreichen Autoren, Schriftstellern, Victor Hugo, Bataille, zu Filmemachern, hier immer wieder Godard, 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 in der Auseinandersetzung, in der ewigen kritischen Auseinandersetzung oder auch Bücher zum Tanz, die im Übrigen in der Tanzszene, wie ich gesehen habe, sehr verbreitet sind. Man kann vielleicht seine Arbeit zusammenfassen unter dem Titel eine kritische Theorie der Bilder, so auch durchaus formuliert, programmatisch in der Dankesrede zur Verleihung des Adorno-Preises in der Paulskirche von Georges Didi-Huberman selber. Darin heißt es unter anderem, eine Kritik der Bilder wäre nicht möglich ohne einen Gebrauch, eine Praxis und eine Produktion kritischer Bilder. Und in diesem Sinne verstehe ich eine ganz andere Aktivität von Georges Didi-Huberman, nämlich die Organisation und Konzeption von Ausstellungen, die vor vielen Jahren begonnen hat, aber in letzter Zeit doch immer größeren Raum einnimmt und zumindest zwei große, wenn nicht riesige Ausstellungen hervorgebracht hat. Das eine ist die Ausstellung zum Atlas, How to Carry the World on the Back. Das ist eine Ausstellung gewesen, in die den Bilderatlas von Abi Warburg zum Anlass nimmt, um über den Bilderatlas in der Kunst der Moderne sozusagen ein großes Panorama auszubreiten und die dabei eine der Bildtafeln von Abi Warburg, auf der ein Atlas dargestellt wird, zum Ausgangspunkt nimmt. Also sozusagen den Bilderatlas zugleich als Welt, die man mit sich tragen kann, betrachtet. Und das andere ist natürlich die Ausstellung, die auch im Zentrum des heutigen Vortrags stehen wird, oder zumindest schließt der Vortrag daran an, nämlich Uprising. Über die Geste, über die Bewegung des sich Aufbäumens oder des Aufstandes. Es gibt eine ganze Palette sozusagen von den kleinsten Bewegungen des sich Hochbewegens bis hin zum politischen Aufstand, die in dieser Ausstellung in Paris gezeigt wurden. Und ich denke, wir werden nachher in unserem Gespräch auch auf die Ausstellung zurückkommen. Und jetzt freue ich mich auf deinen Vortrag, Georges.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your hospitality to accept I don't speak in German. And thank you, Sigrid, for this so generous presentation. You see, it's for you. So, unfinished, and infinite. Desire and hope, par excellence, they are unfinished and infinite. I would say that they awaken dreams. But it's very difficult to awaken one's dream, not to awaken from a dream, to awaken the dream itself. To fashion something heterogeneous, to acquire the art of reinventing one's mutilated life. That is why one rises up endlessly. Endlessly because very often uprisings collapse, founder, run aground on the sense of conformity or against the cliffs of the police. And yet, one will start again endlessly without ever reaching the final goal, which is the calming of everything. Final goal, reconciliation, final goal, the desire finally satisfied. No, it's not possible. But also where desire never collapses, nor with it the courage to disobey, the impulse to invent, the strength to do otherwise, the energy to become de-subjugated. Uprisings, by means of this inexhaustible multiplicity seen in the history of the human societies, and if we consider them together, they form the great political art of the non finito. This is a detail. In other words, both their constitutive fragility or their constitutional fragility, meaning the fragility to undefine oneself in relation to power, indéfinir, indéfini, and their infinite potency, the potential of volcanoes, of waves, of dust in movement, or of hurricanes. This is a slave uprising in Haiti, 1795. Since nothing in history is ever finished, rising up would amount to knowing how to start again. To start again, whatever the cost, to start again senza fine, over and over, ad infinitum. It is the ability to become a subject that is reborn. Palestine, 1987. That moves again to invent gestualities and forms of life by which this subject would no longer feel subjugated. At the same time, once again, we never finish starting again, continuing to debate or to fight, se battre, se débattre. I'll go on, as Samuel Beckett concluded in his internal debate in The Unnameable, having just uttered his own splitting through the phrase, I must go on, I can't go on. It's obvious that this could also mean that whatever things say no to me, I will, in spite of all, continue to try, to strive, to desire, to speak, to affirm, to invent, and to say no to the no. We endured a lot, and one day we said to ourselves that this could not continue. For too long, we had given up, dropping our arms in submission. Yet, once again, as we were able to do at this moment, like so many others had done before us, once again we raise out arms above our shoulders, which are still weighted down by alienation, bent with pain, injustice, and the burden that dominated until then. There we rise again. Courbet, 1848. We stretch out our arms in the air before us. We lift our heads. we regain the free potency to look face on. We open our mouths. Buenos Aires, 1993. Again and again. We cry out, we sing our desire. With our friends, we discuss how things should be done. We reflect, we imagine, we go on, we act, and we invent. We have risen up. All of us with arms raised then, like the sailors in the battleship Potemkin, when this is the strike. This is battleship Potemkin. When, in the first gesture of disobedience, they threw over their heads the white sheet that had menacingly covered them, like the shipwrecked who seek hope, calling for help from the raft of the Medusa by Jericho. And Eisenstein said that the battleship Potemkin scene was linked to this image. Like Liberty, raising her flag and leading the French revolutionaries of 1830 in the famous painting by Eugène Delacroix. Like the children in Zéro de Conduite, the film by Jean Vigo, who threw from the roof of their school whatever they could get their hands on. Or like Goya's Lumpenproletarian, who still wonders what form his despair and anger should take. In a painting that it is now in the National Museum of Fine Arts in Buenos Aires, Goya painted a massacre which recalls the disasters of war. It is of an astonishing violence. Power of weapons is shown in its ability to kill any potency, the potency in particular of a woman. A woman shown on the left of the painting with her arms wide open, and that we can imagine since her face is reduced to a brown stroke, is wholly in her cry. It is a cry face, a face cry. Alone, higher up on a hill, a human being sketched in such a way that we see only a basic human appearance, raises his or her arms. It is all in all a gesture of despair first, facing whatever atrocious things are happening below. And second, a gesture of a call for help toward any potential saviors outside of the frame. And third, it's a gesture of tragic imprecation beyond or through a call for vengeance. Like the well-known figure of the man executed by firing squad in 3 de Mayo, who likewise raised his arm high up, it is less the isolated psychological meaning of the character that it is to be identified than the direction of meaning given by the painter to the entire painting. In such scenes, it is to a certain extent the potency of anonymous people that protest and raise its arms in front of the power of armed forces which have come to subjugate or massacre it. This is what we see, of course, in Guernica, where Picasso had his characters' arms thrown up so high, and their eyes and their mouths in the same impulse that the bodies, however injured or stricken, would continue to cry out against, to cry out with a sovereign energy in the constant dialectics between the pathetic forms of death and the victorial and dynamic signs of life, which has been made to rise up again. Such should be the non-finito of history, burdens and jolts, ebbs and flows, frames with their sudden crossings, losses with uprisings. Germain Krul, 1925. All of this without respite. In the middle of this non-finito of history, like skiffs on the waves, and like the medium of politics by which an ebb could make room for a flow, are the bodies, with their gestualities, their imaginations, languages, resubjectivations, with their actions in the public space. That is why politics is always staged, so to speak, with its continual leaning towards appearance, as Hannah Arendt rightly claimed in her fragments on politics, fascist Politik. This setting goes far beyond familiar political allegorizing, like the people assembly or the image of the body of liberty, so often shown in the 19th century from David to Delacroix in particular. The body of liberty is not only a representation, it's an appearance, so Hannah Arendt says, but also a gesture. So it's a presentation and not only a representation, even in its moments of public appearance, which in French we so rightly call manifestation. Toulouse, 2014. Manifestation being a word which seems from a phenomenological viewpoint to translate rather badly into English in the overly argumentative word demonstration. Manifestation is not exactly demonstration, I think. For the French verb manifester, which means, of course, to demonstrate as well as to manifest, manifester. In this verb, you find the hands, manifester, then the arms themselves, and then the entire body. The Latin word manifestus refers to the individual who is taken by the hand, meaning, in this instance, caught red-handed, pris la main dans le sac. It is the visible offender of the social rule. The manifestatio refers to anything that is revealed, everything that is exposed according to the dual meaning of exposed, appearance and risk-taking, in a visible way, in a manifest way, and in a transgressive way, as a challenge against the established order. Manifester in French means to have desired to proclaim one's desire, and then to disobey through acts, or rather through concerted gestures. In the social genealogy of political demonstration, manifestation in Europe, it is striking how parades, festivals, and above all, funerals have provided an anthropological mood for protest gatherings or processions, as Vincent Robert showed in his book Les Chemins de la Manifestation. Manifester would mean to place one's hand on desire, to transform loss, funerals, into uprising. This is French peasant uprising, 19th century. This is Durruti funerals, 1936 in Barcelona. And this is Jean Jaurès funerals 1934, which transformed into a big uprising in Paris. Therefore, to transform loss into uprising, to transform the immobility of the burden into the movement of a river and the paralysis of fear into a sovereign progression, into a gesture of emancipation. We see it precisely in this case of the funeral of Jean Jaurès, as it was described in 1938 by Paul Nizan in the novel The Conspiracy, La Conspiration. I quote Paul Nizan, "The boulevard filled up. It was the workers from the outlying districts, the masses from the city's densely populated eastern and northern neighborhoods. They held the carriageway from one bank to the other bank. The river, the boulevard was a river, the river had finally begun to flow. One could think of vigorous forces of sap, a river, a flow of blood. The boulevard suddenly merited the appellation artère, artery. The motionless men no longer resisted the moving men, nor the spectators the spectacle, nor the silent ones the singers. They stepped down to experience the river's movement. Laforgue, Rosenthal, and Bloyer, too, plunged in it and began to sing." End of quotation. Indeed, a demonstration, a manifestation, in a manifestation, nothing is played out, nothing is decided in advance. Félix Vallotton, 1893. Instead, everything hangs on the happenstance of the event, on the non-finito of history, and of the relations between forces present. On the other hand, a drama is always placed almost classically with its unities of time and place, in which the road or the square are the main stage. The Street as a Stage is in fact the title of a collection of essays on this question. Historians like Charles Tilly or Daniel Tartakovsky have, in the case of France, shown the evolutions of what they call repertoire of collective action, from the subsistence or food riots of the ancient regime to the strikes, electoral meetings, or other street demonstrations in the contemporary period. We manifest, we demonstrate according to the different possible modes of public expression and the different structures of political organization. For example, the revolutionary paradigm of 1789, the Bastille must be taken, or the constitution of the workers' movement later. As we see in the work of Michelet or Victor Hugo before him, Paul Nizan's description that I quoted before is both allegorical and morphological. Allegorical because of the revolutionary sap, la sève, that rises with the agglutination of the marching crowd, united in singing of course the Internationale. But also morphological. The boulevard at that moment merited the appellation artery, says Paul Nizan, since the people circulate in it in a fluid, compact, and powerful movement. Other example, Hamburg, 1986. Everything here is a question of dynamic morphology, which is shown in historical or sociological studies on political demonstrations, For example, the works of Pierre Fabre, Olivier Filleul, and regarding the urban riots, the work of Alain Berthaud. The manifestation then reveals the full complexity of its different aspects, processes, and dialectics. In particular, between its context or frame and the explosion of frame, when demonstrating concerns both democratic right written in the Constitution and an act of radical disagreement and unforeseen struggle that the police will attempt not only to repress, but also to prevent and to delegitimize. These plays of forces, Paris 2016, these plays of forces themselves arise, become manifest, and demonstrate. They appear directly in the streets, on the squares, and as such, cannot be understood without a tactile, sound, or visual observation, or even an anthropology. They need an anthropology of sensible space. Rio de Janeiro, 2016. Agonistic processes on the one hand, when to appear means to come into contact, that it is to say to combat, and on the other hand, processes of effusive participations, fraternizations, space of appeal, space of refusal, the will to be understood, the feeling of not being so, the policing of the demonstration and the police forces, very different. What becomes obvious then is that the manifestation, the demonstration, occupies the sensible space and the visible space in particular, starting with a refusal of the existing political representativity. It has a political expression, and to call direct expression might not be correct, since an expression is always mediatized by its choices of path, watchwords, iconography, or more or less obligatory behavior, which fundamentally challenge the previously held assumptions of the political representation, whether it be parliamentary or even union representation. That is why demonstrators so often invent, this is the point, invent their own original gestualities, songs, and images. Their own art of doing, art de faire, which was the expression, a wonderful text by Michel de Certeau. The arms rise up, but not only in order to vote, as in a parliamentary assembly. Mouths open, and tongues are loosened, but not only in order to utter a political opinion. People march, dance, run, gesticulate, and throw all kinds of things. They press together, they disperse, they sing, they provoke. They make room for the return of a carnivalesque dimension, that is to say, a festivity that demands that the social world be turned upside down, as it was shown by Kuba Mamjurek in the case of Solidarnosc, or by Rocio Martinez in the case of the Chiapas in Mexico. It is therefore not without reason, I mean anthropological and at the same time political reasons, that Pierre Clastres addressed the autonomy and the construction of social freedom of the South American Indians, Guayaki or Guarani, through what he called le grand parler, the grand speech of myths, stories of memories, stories of hopes too, insofar as they are sung for a whole society against the state, society against the state. I quote Pierre Clastres. It's a description of such songs. For the men are getting ready to sing this evening, and their meditation prepares them for the harmony of a soul and a moment that will find expression in the words to come. Soon a voice is raised up, almost imperceptible at first, coming as it does from within a discreet murmur that refrains from enunciating anything distant, for it is engaged in a patient search for the just, the right tone, and the right discourse. But it rises by degrees. The singer is sure of himself now, and suddenly the song rushes out, loud and free and strong. A second voice is stimulated and joins with the first, then another. Words are uttered in quick succession, like answers, always given in advance of the questions. All the men are singing now. They are still motionless. Their gaze is a little more lost than before. They all sing together, but each man sings his own song. They are masters of the night, and each man means to be the master of himself. End of quote. Beautiful text. It is very moving in this description to see how the most oppressed people are able to forge a poetic potency that is already a form of uprising in situations, colonial situations, for example, in which political power as such is unattainable and often undesired. In the example described by Pierre Clastres, the women also speak, and their song manifests then by tradition a particular pathos. I quote, "The women's singing is never joyful. The themes of the songs are always death, illness, and the violence of the white people. And the women thus take upon themselves all the pain and all the anguish of the Ache, the people." Even among the Guayaki, Pierre Clastres insists, man is a political animal, but it is the song here that expresses the alternative of a political desire that is other, that of no longer being what one is when one is oppressed. Other example, 1903. William Dubois devoted an entire chapter in his seminal book, The Souls of Black Folk, on the sorrow songs. Other example. Later, Jerry Silverman collected under the title The Undying Flame 110 songs in 16 different languages created in the very heart of the torments of the Shoah. This is Warsaw Ghetto, 1941. This is how the oppressed people sing endlessly, like a different invocation and revocation response to the non-finito of history. Mourning, anger, desire mixed together. It is the music of the paria, the nameless ones, the rebels, exiles, proletarians. There is the music of Armenian people. There is the rebetiko of Greek populations thrown into the sea by the Turks. There are the mineras, that is, songs about the mines, the carceleras, songs about the prison, of the gypsy Andalusian cantejondo, whose essential social tenor and subversiveness was revealed by José Luis Ortiz Nuevo and by Alfredo Grimaldos. They are the political tangos of the slums of Buenos Aires, recently collected by Javier Campo and Ofelia Flores. And they are, of course, all the songs about political struggle in Europe since the French Revolution, including its anarchist character, whose history was traced by Larry Portis. Political songs are created and invented all over the world, from Catalonia to Kabylie, from Mexico to Italy, and which a recent conference entitled Chanter la lutte, Singing the Struggle, attempted to map out. It is said, quite correctly, that these songs were popular. Yet, the use of this expression should not replicate the academic hierarchies in which the learned and the popular ignore each other. The very tense polemic between Arnold Schoenberg and Bertolt Brecht in their exile in Los Angeles, polemics between avant-garde music and music of the people certainly have no more reason to be taken literally in relation to their hostile entrenchment. Archie Shepp, cited by Philippe Carl and Jean-Louis Comolli in their book Free Jazz, Black Power, Archie Shepp claimed that, I quote, "You cannot blow up 3 children and a church without it somehow reflecting itself in some aspect of your cultural experience. That's what the avant-garde is about, I think." End of quotation. And this is said in a context in which the memory of the Habo music, which the remarkable figure of the lumpen proletarian singer Joe Hill, who was given the nickname in the first decades of the 20th century, the troubadour of the revolt, because of his both poetic and political slogans and songs, as well, of course, as the great blues tradition, went hand in hand with a sense of experimentation on musical forms. Here I come back to Archie Shepp, a sense that was also in tune with emancipatory political desires of Black Americans in the 1950s and 1960s. The fact that jazz was misunderstood or misheard by Theodor Adorno, although it was in 1937, takes nothing from the overwhelming character of jazz, nor from the wonderful political and philosophical demands of Adorno. The music of Schoenberg or Berg sounded no less degenerate to the Nazi than that of jazz orchestras. And the sound utopias of contemporary scholarly music, as Laurent Fénéroux called them, does not cause us any less to rise up with their sometimes manifest political stakes, as we see, for example, in an extraordinary opera by Luigi Nono, dedicated to the death of the Paris Commune. The same in John Coltrane, Albert Ayler, or Ornette Coleman. It is striking that in his first great book of political philosophy, Ernst Bloch, and this was written between 1915 and 1917, Ernst Bloch wanted to begin with the aesthetic question of forms. It was an opportunity to reach, he said, a philosophy of music that made up the central part of his work, filled with very unorthodox Marxism. From Ernst Bloch's viewpoint, every form, be it a sound, visual or literary form, is capable of rising from the public space, I quote, as a displaced prophetic gift. That is the essential prophetic, apocalyptic, or utopian tenor of the aesthetic form understood by Ernst Bloch as desire for the other time, the other place, other semiotic regime, other political world. Utopia in bodies in movement. Maidan Place, 2004. Every demonstrating body, therefore, could be looked at as a body of liberty, and it is worth recalling once again Delacroix, that Delacroix himself returned to the dynamic of these ancient figures of nymphs called victories. Victory. Every demonstrating body, therefore, would be like the prow. You know that this is a prow of a boat, or of a ship. Every demonstrating body would be like the prow of a ship that advances behind it. That prow has its own prows, a front, the forehead that faces up, eyes that burn with desire, for example, but, very important, the mouth. The mouth, which is generally the beginning, or, if you prefer, the prow of animals. This is a quotation from Georges Bataille in the journal Document, 1929. He writes, and on important occasions, human life is still bestially concentrated in the mouth. Rage makes men grind their teeth, while terror and atrocious suffering turn the mouth into the organ of rending screams. The mouth opens wide to exclaim, to demand, to transgress, albeit through a process of regression that Pierre Fédida examined after reading Bataille in his beautiful book, Par où commence le corps humain. The Bodies of Liberty, Buenos Aires, 2008. The bodies of liberty move on, therefore, mouths at the fore, and mouths open on their rallying song or their fundamental claim. At the same time, the arms rise up, I repeat. It is as though the demonstrating bodies, while exposing themselves, opened up to the world and sought to open the world itself by brandishing their arms thrown forwards. But there is nothing human, there is nothing political that is not matched and mediatized. The demonstrating bodies stand perpetually between expression and representation, and images of all sorts of objects serving as media for a claim are brandished on the tips of outstretched arms to fulfill their role in the sensible space of uprisings. We must then wonder, what is at the end of the outstretched arms of those who have risen up? What rises up, or what is thrown up by such arms? First, it is their own hands or their fists. We can recall how in Eisenstein's battleship Potemkin, the fists of the Odessite, upheld by the unjust death of the sailor, had tensed up, each alone, in anger before appearing unanimously in a sign of rebellion, which then was far more than a mere effective expression or affective expression. Fists raised together, it was now a gestural emblem for the communist protest. In strike, the arms had risen up too, and the hands had opened towards the sky, claiming their desire for emancipation. A little later, Jean Jaurès was to harangue the crowd in Pré Saint-Gervais with his closed fist at the end of his right arm, mark of intensity, with the left arm firmly anchored to the overhanging flag, red flag, of course. It was like an anti-militarist version of Liberty Leading the People, in which the flag was brandished on the right and the bayonet on the left, as we see also in the image by Gustave Courbet for the Salut Public during the 1848 revolution. A famous photograph by Willy Ronis, taken in 1938 in the studio of the Citroën factory of Javel, Paris, shows a woman haranguing the other women employees. At the end of her arm, her index finger points to a place outside. She holds a little sheet of paper. She incites the women workers to demand their legitimate rights and therefore, on that day, to go on strike. She accounts also, as Willy Ronis said, for the action of the CGTU, Confédération Générale du Travail Unitaire, in which she was an activist for solidarity with the fellow of Spain, for Spanish Republicans. Her name was Rose Zehner. At the end of the strike, she was fired, and she gained public recognition only much later, when the photograph, which had been too underexposed to be published in the communist magazine Regard, for which it has been intended, was finally published in 1980. In this way, we can see that the outstretched arm accompanies the speech of the uprising. It extends it and transmits it to others when it is a matter of rallying a group for a particular political cause. The outstretched arm condenses several operations. It opens the space that is nearby to an outside, and it exclaims or it cries out the body from itself, and consequently contributes to re-subjectifying each one who has reasons for complaining in a group who collectively will make a complaint. In French it's se plaindre, porter plainte. Make a complaint in the public space. In this way, Rose Zehner gesture and those of passionarias in general, from the outburst of tragic Greek women studied by Nicole Loro, to the famous harangues of Dolores Ibarruri, the communist passionaria in Madrid, and Federica Montseny, the anarchist passionaria in Barcelona and beyond, has a contemporary extension in a very simple, yet, I think, extraordinarily powerful gesture that was invented or reinvented by the feminists of the early 1970s. This gesture. As Laura Corradi has shown, this gesture, I quote, is part of the sign of language used by the deaf. By opening the thumb and the index finger of each hand, we make an L, and then the extremities of the two thumbs and index fingers join to make a triangle, the sign for the vagina, used in Italy during the feminist demonstrations of the 1970s. But it has to do with a very ancient sign going as far back, at least, as the Sumerian civilization. Here, then, it is reappropriated as the feminist duplication of the V for victory, as a sign of rebellion, and also as an image. It is an image of the female sexual organ through a political and public resubjectivation. Ilaria Busoni has called it, quite correctly, a gesture of self-realization. Here, indeed, women came together to expose, at the end of their outstretched arms, before themselves, the gestural image of what was both the most intimate element of their body, a place of pleasure, but also of shared suffering in the experience of being reified or controlled by male predation, and also the claimed element of their sexual freedom or their decision regarding gender. It was, in a way, through resubjectivation, a newly invented sexual organ, as Ilaria Busoni said, that appeared suddenly in the public space between the hands of these women. A gesture of the sexual organ, this is very paradoxical, a gesture of an organ. It is therefore the sublimated, full and confident gesture of the partisanship. It is not such a gesture when you have fists closed or hands imitating a gun, etc. It is a gesture of desire, indicating a relation to the self, of the self to the other, referring to an inside, but it's open. It's open. So it's open to the world, to the shared world, which it unframes or reframes in its own way. It faces up. It takes a stand. It marks as such a cracks, a new dialectics in our usual split lines regarding the relation between the subjective world and the public world, desire and politics. I have an interpretation, perhaps it's just an hypothesis. Perhaps it's not coincidence that, although invented in the 1970s, this gesture also suggested the form of the lozenge or diamond form, which was precisely in 1959 chosen by Jacques Lacan to indicate the relation of what he called poinçon, meaning lozenge, diamond, stamp, which in what he called the fundamental, le fantasme fondamental, the fundamental fantasy, ties and unties a subject to the object that he or she desires. This relation, according to Lacan in his seminar on the desire and its interpretation, I quote, ensures the minimal structure to the support of desire. This minimal structure, he said, is already complex and all in all dialectical. It is complexified so long as it is in an outsider or third relation, so it's dialectical, with the fantasy that the subject constitutes himself as desire. It is, therefore, what makes the subject give himself so long as he fails in his relation to the object or to the real. End of quote. Here is a complementary way to understand the feminist gesture. It's a given form a form that is affirmed, addressed, but also it's a form of cutting, intrinsic to desire, as Lacan explained by saying that this relation shows us fundamentally that, I quote again, every subject is not one, which is, I think, what the feminists proclaimed publicly in their own way. A lozenge gesture, then, a gesture that both cuts and conjoins, separates and unites. Partage du sensible, a gesture of sharing, in the dialectic sense that we might find in the word, in the order of desire as well as politics, somewhere between the image of revolt and image of hope, all of which, it's just a parenthesis and also a pleasure of showing some image, all of which deployed in what has been called visual feminist culture, the decisive visual world of artists like Valley Export, Cindy Sherman, but most for me, this is feminist gesture. Anna Mendieta, and the wonderful artist, I love this artist, Elena Almeida. It's about tactility. What gesture, then, do we find at the end of our raised arms? The body that hopes is still empty-handed, the same with the Paul Klee. The body that resists seeks another hand to take its own hand and to extend its action. This is a flyer of the Varsavian ghetto uprising. When it has to surrender and feels condemned, it throws its palms on towards the world, on towards future times perhaps, in a gesture of desperate challenge. The body that has risen up carries itself forwards in a more apparent and joyous way. But what are the strategies and the apparatuses of its pretension or its progressions? An endless inventiveness, a great non-finito of writings, images, objects. In the conflict involved in violent demonstration, it's above all the sling, the cocktail Molotov, the cobblestone Paris, the rock. In the extreme cases of civil wars or wars of occupation, as shown by Goya in his Disaster, it could be an inexperienced hand of a woman that dares to arm a piece of artillery. Incredible. When all the partisans are already dead around her. During his sociological inquiry on the strategies of the street, Olivier Filleul took from the Central Service of the French Police, CRS, a photo that shows displayed on a white tablecloth the objects confiscated during the uprising of Cress-Malville in 1977, slings, metal nuts, welding rods, exposed like war trophies. The non-violent ways are even more inventive and varied, as though it were about making a weapon, making a gesture, making a sign, or making an image with the most minimal thing. There are, of course, banners that precede the demonstrators and in a way proclaim or exclaim for them. Philippe Artière wrote a very helpful book on this subject while reducing it to what he calls an exposed writing, an exhibited writing. But the banner is as much a surface of visibility as it is a surface of legibility. The banner works alongside the flags, which often saturate the sensible space of demonstration. It is often figurative. If Henri Cartier-Bresson tirelessly traveled the world to photograph everything he could of demonstrators' processions, just 4 examples, it's a very big corpus, which is an endless task, of course, the art of the non-finito in front of history. It is because he saw the relation between bodies and banners as an exemplary anthropological form of social life. That is why one does not merely stretch out one's arm to speak, as we see in the student assemblies. This is Freie Universität, 1968. Or to point the way to the demonstrators' procession. There are images at the ends of raised up arms. They are flags that they are images. They are flags that sometimes take on the lyrical and childlike dimension of huge kites. They are balloons, some huge and surprising that the police don't know what to do with. Pot lids to make a huge racket, but which are also images of shields. Carnivalesque constructions made from bits and pieces, resembling festive tanks. For example, this is a bicycle megaphone, and this is a teddy bear catapult. You could see all this in the collection of disobedient objects brought together in 2014 at the Victoria and Albert Museum. You find masks or disguises, like you could see among the feminists or the Zaps of ACT UP. It is as though it were necessary to re-establish the carnival, the politics of laughter, inherent to caricature of the past, or to reenact the extremely interesting Feast of Fools, whose profoundly blasphemous dimension was observed in 1954 by Michel Foucault in Münsterlingen. That is also why the seasoned members of the Zapatista army in Chiapas so patiently continued to embroider their figurative sheets or to make their semi-traditional, semi-propagandist dolls. Everywhere, therefore, those who have risen up create images, sport them, distribute them. It is worth noting that in May 1968, the typographical, lithographical, or serigraph presses were working at full capacity alongside the intense activity of photographers and filmmakers. Here, the Cinétract by Jean-Luc Godard and Gérard Fromanger. 4 years later, my final example, some painters from the Malassi cooperative found themselves forced to use their paintings in an exhibition, a very official exhibition called for by Georges Pompidou, and which they had decided to desert. Use their paintings as figurative banners or makeshift shields in front of a police regiment that was quite incapable of knowing who or what was to be verbalized. Artists demonstrate too, and demonstrations also put on all kinds of formal invention. Sorry, I was too long, it is time to end up, although it's impossible to end up with such a topic, because it's your topic, the non-finito. It is due to the non-finito, in which consist images, desires, and hopes. This is the non-finito of the Wunschbilder. Thank you.
Thank you, Georges, for your, I would say, extended Bilder Atlas of Uprising. Extended insofar as you included also corporeal aspects, the corporeal level of Uprising, songs, symbols, stones, flags, and even books and paintings as shields. So it is a kind of Bilder Atlas senza fine, and a prolonged Bilder Atlas. And therefore, I think it would be interesting to discuss some theoretical or methodological aspects in relation to Abi Warburg's ideas. When listening, it was striking somehow to me that you used the concept in terms of gesture all the time, but never referred to the pathos formula, which was the central concept for Abi Warburg when he built his tables with gestures throughout the history from antiquity to modernity. And I wonder why you decided to use gesture instead of pathos formula.
No, I don't have to choose. I use pathos formula when I try to establish a link between, for example, in the case of Nike, victory, the Greek one, de la croix. This is a pathos formel, of course. I would say pathos formel. It's true that in this essay, I am speaking about the contemporary and less on the question of long duration. But for me, there is not to choose between one or the other formulation. I would say, to refer to a famous statement by Giorgio Agamben, but perhaps you're not, you don't agree, when he says that one of the most important theoretical lesson of Abi Warburg is to say that at the center is the gesture. So therefore the concept of pathos formel. But gesture, you don't like the word gesture?
No. I just, that's why I said I want to discuss some theoretical and methodological problems involved when you extend the concept of the Bilder Atlas to other forms of manifestation and
it's obvious
media.
for me that it is a new way, because the work on Ninfa was a new way to take a Warburgian intuition, namely the question of political iconology, which was so well developed in Germany, but not very well in France, I think, not very well in the United States, but very well here. And so I try to open the range of possibilities. Perhaps it's a mistake for me not to have included the vocabulary of pathos formal, but
This was not a critical question.
No,
but
no, no,
just
no,
to,
no.
to make it more
it's just
clear.
a discussion. For me, there is no split between the vocabulary of gesture and the one of pathos formal. Gesture, you know that I try to use the concept of symptom also. So I try to make changes in the strict Warburgian vocabulary and to extend, so to speak. This was a phenomenological description. I gave to you many examples without profound analysis, so it was a kind of a phenomenological atlas, so to speak. So it's better to say gesture. If I would study the relation between Victory to Delacroix to Eisenstein, here the word pathos formal is important.
I think it was more than a phenomenological presentation. When contemplating how to introduce your work, I was reminded to the beginning, and the step from the photographic iconography of hysteria, by the way, coming back to the other side, the iconography of Uprising is very interesting. But the second step was going, or let's say, analyzing the ground, the foundation, the invisible foundation of iconography in your Fra Angelico book. And when listening today, my impression was that it's a similar step dealing with corporeal gesture and focusing on emphasizing the way how from the very basic level of a corporeal movement something may emerge, which turns first in a gesture and then second into a manifestation and a political demonstration. So it's a kind of analogy, for me it was a kind of analogy to your analysis of the process of figuration in painting. So it's more than just phenomenology.
Yes, but it's from the beginning to the end about pathos formal, because the question I asked from the beginning of my paper, how this man, I mean the man represented by Goya, the Lumpenproletariat, how he will be able to find the form of his pathos. It is about finding the form of the pathos.
It's about expression. And
it's it's about
and
expression.
searching existing forms of.
It's why I said that it happens that demonstrations are more expressions than representation in the political sense.
Here I would like to discuss the manifestation.
Okay.
And your uneasy relationship to the English demonstration, because the meaning in German is a bit different.
Yes.
So yeah, and I think this is interesting.
But in German there is this sense. It's clear that how.
No, manifestation is not a demonstration. So, for example, in Benjamin's critique of violence, the word manifestation plays a central role, and especially in the sense to find something, some expression that is not used as a means for an end. So immediacy, a kind of immediate expression. And he calls this Manifestation. So it's not a demonstration with a certain goal or a certain end or a certain topic, but the mere manifestation. He discusses this in order to figure out whether there might be something like a mere violence.
Yes, but in the cases which are interesting to my eyes, for example, Nuit debout in Paris, it was a means for no end. The end was not said. Nobody knew what was the end, and
Exactly.
that was interesting.
Yeah. Therefore, I would say manifestation in German is something different than demonstration, because demonstration mostly take place for a certain end, and it's very often that a certain statement or even ideological statement is put on the top. And therefore I would like to address the question, which are the moments when a manifestation or an uprising turns into something like a political, ideological demonstration, as, for example, in Paris, after Bataclan, Je suis France.
I don't know. Probably I am less trained in political activity than you, surely. And so I am very, so to speak, I am very young in this problem. So my problem is not so radical in its theoretical and political. I am not a political thinker now. Let us wait. Now I am working.
Democracy and education.
Yes. Now I am working, and this could be also linked to the Warburgian problematics. As you know, I was working on lamentation, on lament, for a while. And there is an extraordinary observation by Warburg about the fact that the representation of life and the intensity of this, the pathos-formen of life, intensity, desire, sexual desire, Dionysiac, bacchanal, etc., all of this appear on Roman sarcophagi, on objects of death. So for me, this is absolutely crucial, and it is why I consider Donatello the great artist for this problem. Working on lamentation, I realized how contrary was the movement of people surviving around the dead body. The kind of energy, the fantastic energy of bodies around the dead body. You remember we have discussed this photograph of Kosovo lamentation. It's amazing. So my problem now is how to convert the loss into desire, how to convert the accablement, the being completely, and it's very Warburgian. It's the maniac, depressive God. It's the same. It's a Warburgian problem.
Perhaps the Greeks were already psychoanalysts because
of course.
The way Sigmund Freud conceptualized this tension is the counter-striving constellation between death drive and Eros or life drive. And in the beginning you started with an interesting rhetorical series. So,
but let me finish. Let me finish for your first question. If I am in this problem, from lamentation to a kind of energy of living in spite of all or desiring something, it is because I am before the problem of means and ends. Before.
Yes.
I am not able to grasp theoretically this problem.
That's why I compared your lecture today with the work on Fra Angelico, on the way of how figuration takes place.
Yeah.
And the same problem is the problem of iconography, transformation of energy into iconography, and transformation of corporeal movements into meaningful gestures and even political gestures.
And forms.
And
song,
statements.
An object and
but also meaningful statements. And what was obvious in all your examples, there is no one example from a right-wing uprising, but there are right-wing uprisings. So how would you deal with that? Because we now in Germany are very much occupied with this question, how to coming to terms with these right-wing demonstrations.
Of course, there are right-wing uprisings. One of the most important of them was the March on Rome by Mussolini. It was an authentic uprising and also an authentic popular uprising. There are some Italian people here, if they are not, if they don't agree, but I think it was. And the Front National in France is an authentic force of anger and popular one. So but there is a big difference, I think. I just take your argument on means and ends. An uprising of a fascist uprising is directly connected to the end. Directly, there is no way. Nuit debout is nothing. Yeah, there is no end. So it's completely different. And I think because many people made comparisons between Leni Riefenstahl with Hitler and Eisenstein with Stalin, it's completely stupid. It has nothing to, because it's not sensible to the form. When Leni Riefenstahl make films, the crowd, it's the mass. It's one thing, it's identity, it's from above. When Eisenstein make a film of an uprising or a revolution, October, for example, it's from above, but it's also from
within.
The point of view, the human point of view in front, eyes in eyes, and it's also filmed on the ground. And there is a wonderful, I think, statement by Bertolt Brecht, how to photograph an uprising. And he says, you cannot frame an uprising only from one point of view, but in the right-wing point of view, there is only one. This is quite easy to make the difference, I think.
So I'm sure that there are questions in the room. We have microphones for you, for those who would like to.
And also, the difference is, do you uprise for the other, or do you uprise for the identity of yourself?
Yeah, but this is not so, in many cases it's not so clear. When you talk on current right-wing uprisings and you evaluate them as authentic, and there's an authentic emotion behind, but in the very beginning a political end. And but it also
it's the reason the pathos is not sufficient. We need the form, and with the form we need what you call meaningful. Sorry for.
Well, over here.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question directly related to that, because that was going on in my head like most of the time during the talk, that I basically, thought this is too nice to be true. So the building of a canon, which kind of reveals a wish to establish like a story or a narration about uprising, which is cleared of ambivalence in the way you just brought it back into the subject. So maybe on a gestural question, like in the gestural context, it will be the question of the Nazi salute, for example, the rising of the hand. And I'm quite curious, maybe to expand this a bit more on a conceptual level, in this question of the relation of the anthropological and the political aspects of this. So it seems to me like the anthropological notion or aspect of it tries to merge images, tries to find the similarities of it, whereas the political could point to the differences within the similarities. And I just wonder, like, is there how to mediate this question, and what could be which would be, I think, essentially the question of the conflict and how to represent this conflict. And yeah, maybe you can tell us a bit more about this question of anthropological and political in this respect. Thank you.
All depends what you call political in your question. Because it's not by chance that I wanted to quote Pierre Clastres, who was both anthropological and political. But what kind of politics? Of course, he was not in the ways of the Marxist canon, for example, at his time. And you, in your question, you began with the word canon, building the canon. And so I can answer to this in a double way. The first is that I am yet unable. I am just an observer now. I don't know where I go. This is the first answer. The second answer is perhaps that philosophy, even political philosophy, is wrong when it tries to construct canons. This is an hypothesis. And this is the way in which, for example, I would disagree with the philosophical style of Alain Badiou, for example. Alain Badiou, if you ask this question to Alain Badiou, he gives you the answer because he has canons. I have no. I don't know what is better on the philosophical level, because I'm sure, No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But I am impressed by a statement by Bergson who said that philosophy is not general. A canon is general. Philosophy is not general. Philosophy must be precise, which is completely different. So the question of canon, all my life I tried to fight against. For example, in art criticism, there is a canon. This is form and formlessness. This is a canon. Or modernism, anti-modernism, postmodernism. This is a canon. I cannot work with this. I cannot. Simply, I cannot. And the reason is that canons are linked, at the end, they are linked to models of temporality. If you accept from the beginning the temporal model of Nachleben, afterlife, you cannot say, this is the canon for today. You cannot say this. But how it is productive on the political level, I don't know.
You used the word repertoire. But let's come back to the problem of form. In all your examples, you used paintings, art, photography, and photography from real demonstrations.
Yeah.
Are there differences in reading these images for you? The same gesture painted by Goya and enacted by a living woman in Buenos Aires, for example. Are there differences?
Of course, many differences. And when you confront an image, when you want to analyze it, of course, you are obliged to take seriously the specific situation, the specific medium, etc., etc. I try it with Giacometti or Fra Angelico. Here, it's completely different. It's very more close to the question of the atlas, the Bilder Atlas. And you know that in Aby Warburg's Bilder Atlas, you have a masterpiece of Renaissance painting, which, by the way, is reproduced in black and white. The color is so beautiful in Raphael Stanze, okay? And just close to this, you have a newspaper, you have... The choice, the methodological choice to go beyond the specificity of medium, you must know what you gain and what you lose.
That's dialectics.
Of course, of course. So I decided here to lose, but I was not so far from the painting of Goya, for example, but I accepted to lose in the mise en to the montage of great works of art and photography, photo reportage, of course, or even popular art and learned art. But this must be transgressed. These canons must be transgressed, and this was a beginning of discussion with you, for example, especially with you, in the question of music. Popular and the learned opera by Nono and a song by a flamenco singer. What's the relation? There is a relation.
Perhaps one more, last question.
This is actually following on from what you were talking about just a moment ago. I am thinking quite a lot of Jacques-Louis David while you're talking, and the Oath of the Horatii, and the fact that he also organized revolutionary processions. And my understanding is that he was reading Rousseau, and Rousseau was invoking the Greek model of the festival. And I believe during the French Revolution, David organized one of these. One of the first ones was the Festival of Liberty, and it was quite intoxicated and joyful, I think. And then the right wing organized the Festival of Law, and there was a kind of competition between those. And I'm also thinking with Oath of the Horatii, that always makes me think, in one sense, it's often seen as almost proto-fascistic, for obvious reasons. In another sense, however, it's like a sort of Eisenstein cinematic gesture in the painting. So I'm just wondering, how we draw the line between a right-wing or a fascistic popular procession and a painting that is revolutionary, and in between. Would you have any thoughts about those examples? I'm not sure, it's not very
yes,
coherent.
I would give the same answer concerning to draw a line or to establish a canon. You draw a line. What line? Where? Every image, every phrase, every action is a knot of many lines, different lines. What is interesting in your example, and which come back to the first question of Sigrid, is about the method. The method in analyzing images must take, but here in Germany it's obvious. So I say just a banality here. That is, we must, when you analyze Renaissance painting or the Primavera, we must know about the festivals, what happens not only on the wall of the Medici Palazzo on which the painting is hanged on, but also further in the street itself, the Maggio Fiorentino, the feast, the festivals. What happened? It was fascist or not fascist? It was not fascist because Savonarola was very furious against this fest. But perhaps it was fascist because it was organized by a superpower of Medici. It's not a coherent line to analyze, I think, for objects of the past. Now we have to make choices, of course. We must draw lines every day, but in the history it's much more complicated to draw a line between David, yes, it's very interesting that he organized processions. Oh, very interesting. But it was fascistic or not, I think it's not the question.
I think he also just stressed that was a popular event which had different rules to making a painting. So I think it is interesting that he...
I want to say something, perhaps. You
Mm-hmm.
give me the idea that perhaps it's important
Can
to...
you use this as a conclusion?
Okay. I use it as a conclusion. The conclusion should be... Let us not conclude, that is to say, let us not judge. The concept of judgment, so you can read Kant, after Kant you can read Hannah Arendt, okay, this is fantastic, but you can read also the text by Deleuze, Pour en finir avec le jugement, to end with the judgment. If you consider judgment to draw a line, one line, or to establish a canon in which something is good and some other thing is bad, that is not interesting. And I finish with referring to this absolutely marvelous text by Deleuze, whose title is Pour en finir avec le jugement. Wonderful. Let us things exist, he says.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.